everyone, and welcome back to VKBP Tutorials, powered and supported by ABF. VKBP is a Swedish music production program for female and transgender producers, and we cover like everything that you need to get started in your music production career, from the physics of sound to DAW workflow, you name it. I am Linn Elisabet, and I'm a DJ and producer, lecturer, mastering engineer in training, gender riots, and everything else that you want to make me. This is the last tutorial of mine for this project, and because of this final bracket, I have chosen not only to give today's tutorial more of a podcast format, but also a more personal one. And I'm not going to lie to you, I have this scripted. I've been working quite hard on just like finalizing this theme because it's a really important one to me. Going into this project as a former lead of the VKBP producer program, I quickly got like sentimental and thought a lot about the power that the producer program brought into so many hearts and minds through the years. VKBP implements so-called norm critic pedagogy, and having brought that into other classrooms of other clients, over the past 3 years or something, I've seen a significant amount of students daring to like try new pronouns, correct their names, live their truths, and set out on their creative journeys through a safer spaces education. It's something about like daring to put words to their fears, daring to do this 180 and just face them, not only creating but living freely and authentically through their art. Actually, it was being part of norm critic education that enabled me to grow and to do the same. Creativity and fantasy, which can be found within any type of art really, allow us to express and internalize and externalize concepts, names, words, which our minds previously were unable to access. It makes us able to live our fantasy, and living our fantasy is the step where boundaries between fantasy and reality starts to fade and eventually dissolve. And to me, this is like the definition of freedom. In the end, that is the power that signifies the producer program to me. And in the long run, the life of a healthy creator, more than all the very real technical aspects of being a producer. So it was obvious to me that I needed to do an episode on this, like inspired by all those concepts for the tutorial channel. And upon planning for this episode, I started thinking about like, okay, what is the most universal obstacle that all of us stumble onto like sometime in our career? And what instantly came to my mind was fear, doubt, and imposter syndrome. So that's the road that we're going down today. In case you do not already have this in your vocabulary, imposter syndrome is defined as the fear as being called out of being a fraud. And the fear of being a fraud is in most cases not even a fact, yet the feeling of being one creates this mirage within the fearful, which overrides that fact and becomes part of the individual's truth. And if carried for long, this severely lowers the carrier's self-reliance, self-identity, and internal locus of control into becoming a more external one. So you become like dependent on external validation and external kicks. And all in all, this self-fulfilling prophecy of imposter syndrome is the result of unfaced, unnurtured, and above all, uncommunicated fear. This fear is a shared one, however. Imposter syndrome is a very real and very serious issue, and it's a struggle that more or less all of us are having. Yet we rarely speak about it to each other. And I've been thinking a little about like, why is that? Because if we're all under the thumb of the same phenomenon, why can't we just like share and overcome it together? And I think this comes from like the fear of, if you're admitting to having imposter syndrome, you're giving it a face, and we also lose that face that we're trying so really like desperately try and uphold the face of not being a fraud. This is why it gets so dark and dangerous, because it keeps us stuck in a double bind, eating us from within and shutting down our cognitive functions that we need in order to be able to learn and talk and think and express ourselves. And the best example that I can think of right now is me sitting here having imposter syndrome over talking to you about overcoming imposter syndrome, because I am feeling the fear of being a fraud myself, which would make me a fraud for giving you advice on it. So it's kind of a catch-22. Yet, how is anyone going to be able to teach us to overcome these fears if we assume that all of us are feeling human beings? Because I'm not a robot, and none of us are. But truth is, I did find some really good tools, techniques, and strategies to be able to handle this type of stuff over the past years. And despite my fear, I will use this space not only to share them with you, but also as a part of my process of overcoming by talking about it. However, I just want to say, I don't really think that there is any such thing as overcoming fear and imposter syndrome in the sense of these feelings completely going away. They are a really important part of our core as human beings. We are conditioned to experience this stuff and these feelings and emotions because fear is like a catalyst function for us to warn ourselves and adjust so that we will not become like social outcasts and abandoned by our pack. Realize that. In the end, it's like the fear of dying, which makes it so terrifying and paralyzing, because if you're abandoned by your pack, then you die, right? But there are ways of befriending this fear and to strengthen the muscle that is able to take care of those fears within you. It's a matter of relating to fear rather than relating from it, and responding to it rather than reacting to it. Letting it know that it's being seen, not getting swallowed by it, saying a polite thank you for trying to protect me, but you do not serve me right now, and allowing it to eventually go away. And I mean, I know befriending fear is really daunting. Probably it is the most difficult task that we all have on a social level as humanity. But it's also maybe the most important one, because usually it is our fears that are holding us back from fully living and being ourselves. So now that we've been talking a little bit about this, I think it is time that I share my little 4-step program with how to take care of this type of feelings. And I really hope that you find something in there that is useful for you and that you can use to your toolbox as well. As you see, it becomes darker and darker around me here. It's that time of the day. I've turned on another light. We'll hope that as this room gets darker, at least I can bring some brightness to this very heavy and intense subject. So let's dive into this 4-step program that I developed for you today. The first one I chose to call "You Don't Have to Believe Your Thoughts." My brother once shared this concept with me when we were talking about judgment and prejudice, and I quote, "Your first thought is not your real thought." Your first thought is not your real thought. And what he meant by that is the first thought, or the impulse thought, is the brain's programmed response, our conditioning from society, basically. The second thought, or the way that we choose to relate to the first thought, is what is really saying something about us. It is us because we have control over it and a free choice of its relation to our conditioned impulse. So we have the freedom to shape that second thought into a compassionate and non-judgmental one. And from that power, we can work on finding a healthier way to relate to our conditioning and to our fears, and eventually change them, or at least remember that they are not fact. Because the first impulse thought might feel true at the moment that you're having it, but it is not facts. Of course, it is easier said than done. It's a muscle that many of us need to learn how to flex and to strengthen, and it only happens by practice and by time. So first of all, you need to learn to identify when this roller coaster of imposter syndrome takes off. And when you learn that, then begins the practice which will strengthen you over time. So that was step 1. And moving on to step 2, like, okay, we're feeling this stuff now. It's deep, it's dark. What do we do? A terrifying but really effective way of exercising freedom is to do a 180 and face that fear. And I'm not telling you that you're like supposed to go and do something irrational or dangerous, but rather like meet that fear on an emotional level within yourself. And I mean, fear of fear is the strongest of all the fears, because within that fear is like the fear of facing ourselves. And fear can certainly like shut us down in that cognitive sense. But the only way to befriend it is to be with it and realize the fear itself is not going to hurt you. Once we have settled down a little bit in this process of facing and the worst physical reactions to it are over, we can start investigating by using some classic problem-solving techniques. And the first thing that I would want you to ask yourselves are, what are the visible problems here? And in this case, it would be investigating what do I believe makes me feel this fear? To give you some examples, it could be like, is it the fear of inadequacy? Is it the fear of not being acknowledged? Fear of failure? Is it shame? Very universal ones. And then, once you have identified these things, ask yourself, what is the core problem? And to quote one of my favorite Buddhist practitioners, Tara Brach, she says, like, what is it that I am unwilling to feel? What is it that I am unwilling to feel? And often there is like an universal underlying fear, which projects all of these other fears or problems on the surface. And once we're able to identify that core fear and nurture it, the tension across the board on all of these other more surface-like fears are going to dissolve. And this is the very boundary by which fear can wake us up instead of shutting us down. Let us grow and strengthen that self-reliance, self-identity, and internal locus of control. So next time fear is here, try and challenge it. Use it to your advantage, because it might not look like it at the surface, but it could be a gift in disguise for your personal growth. And I'd like to make a disclaimer here, because some fear come from unresolved trauma, and unresolved trauma should not be faced alone. So if this is the case for you, I urge you to ask for help, like professional help. This is the bravest thing that you can do in such a situation. So, yeah, give that to yourself. Now, this practicing leads us to our next step, because once you've been aware of this for a while, you'll also start to get to know your cycles. And imposter syndrome, just like creativity, tends to come in these cycles. They are individual to all of us, like when they occur, how long they are, how often they come, and also like the actions and stimuli that either triggers them or that makes them resolve. And when entering a new cycle of fear, it's really important to just like keep your head cold and remember, this will pass. This will pass. And if it helps you, try to approach it with a bit of curiosity and just investigate it and like observe and take notes on how it takes form before it eventually fades out again. Knowing how your individual cycles look will help you to keep more calm next time the train arrives. But being in this, of course, can feel really lonely. And that leads us to the final and the key step of the strategy, which is talk to others about what you're experiencing. Please remember, You are not alone in this. And I would like once again to refer back to my favorite teacher, Tara Brach, because she says this really beautiful thing about fear, that there is no such thing as my fear, but there is the fear. Fear is universal, and so are the sources of fear. So despite how different we might seem to each other, our core fears are often shared with almost anyone that we meet in one way or another. And we spent a lot of time talking about this stuff in the producer program. And to be fair with you, I never really had that type of space to talk to other creators about this type of thoughts before. No matter where I turn in this industry, it seems like everyone is just stuck in this double bind of self-hatred and narcissism, and it can make anyone go mad. I experienced that the only way forward is through empathy, through compassion and solidarity and transparency. These are criteria that can build a solid foundation for the healing that we're also, in the end, responsible of practicing ourselves. Because despite the need of sharing what we're feeling, the real strength of overcoming comes from within, and it can definitely accept like inspiration and momentum and help from others. But in the end, the major work lies within. And this is where the concepts that I kept talking about, self-reliance, self-identity, and internal locus of control comes back and like closes the circle of all of this. So those are my 4 key strategies on how to befriend imposter syndrome. And I'm going to do a little recap with you. So the first step is you do not have to believe your thoughts. You do not have to believe your thoughts. The second one is do a 180 and face the fear. Then comes get to know your cycles. And then last but not least, talk to others. And meanwhile, developing this relationship to yourself, I just want to say, like, stay patient, because I am nowhere even close to perfect in these regards. Yet I can see a huge difference of my ability to take care of these difficult emotions and how it developed during the past years. Adding new shades and colors to this palette in conversation with others, constant journey and work to stay sane, to make sense in this intense mayhem of a world. If anyone is interested in reading further about any of the things that I've been talking about now, I suggest that you look up Tara Brach, who I referred to already twice, Simone de Beauvoir, Audre Lorde, the concepts internal locus of control, self-reliance, and self-identity. I mean, there's a lot more to this, of course, but those are the ones which have been like the most important ones for me to figure out this strategy. Mixed, of course, with my own reflections and conversations that I've had with people at the producer program, at my old art school, Stockholm Södra. And speaking of Simone de Beauvoir, who is one of my absolute favorite existentialists, she describes that freedom is a process rather than an outcome, because she means that the journey of liberating oneself is what defines freedom. And I like the idea of that, because that means that if the ultimate goal is freedom, and my process of being in itself like makes it already here, that means that I don't have to prove anything to myself nor to anyone else in regards to my visions and dreams and creations. And to be fair with you, I don't think that any of us really like 100% knows what we're doing creatively. At least not if our creation process is just that, like a process. And a journey in itself. And in the end, I think that is what makes us all true. Or what makes us all frauds, like who knows which one of them in the end doesn't really matter, because if we are all human, with the struggles and fears that being a human means, there is really nothing to compare to which can tell the difference. That's kind of a thought of solace to me. Yeah, I mean, that's everything I have for you today. And as it looks like, maybe even within the frame of this project, do not fear, we are going to discuss the future of the channel because we know that it's been appreciated. We'll keep you posted on that. There will be a few more episodes by my colleagues before Christmas. I also want to say that I don't expect anyone to 100% like buy into an explanation model like this, because I think it is really important that you tailor your own, like in relation to your needs and your thoughts and how your mind works. However, if there's anyone who has any questions or any thoughts that you want to share, feel free to hit me up on my social media. You can search for Linn Elisabet. I'm mainly on Instagram and Facebook. And yeah, let me know what your thoughts are on this subject. Take care now, and stay safe and stay fierce, and we'll see in which format we meet next time. Goodbye.